Terminology, tenacity, trilateral. I'm going to be obsessed with those three T words because the fate of Ukraine may well depend on all of them. In an extraordinary convening at the White House today, President Trump met with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy and the most powerful European leaders to see if the savage war launched by Russia can end with what remains of Ukraine intact and protected. That's where terminology matters. The diplomatic air is peppered right now with references to security guarantees and Article 5-like protections. How those are defined and fortified will decide if the end of war means safety for Ukraine or it living in the permanent stalking shadow of Russia. America and Europe simply cannot guarantee Ukraine's security or back up something like Article 5-like protections without tenacity. Tenacity means troops, armed troops, prepared and trained to deter and possibly repel a future Russia attack. Speaking of terminology, Article 5, what is it? Well, it is the core of the NATO alliance. An attack on one member nation triggers a military response from all. Never before, we should remind ourselves, has Europe contemplated diluting the plain language of Article 5 with the word like, meaning similar to but not exactly. The last word is trilateral. That's a meeting with President Trump, President Zelenskyy, and President Putin of Russia at some future time. Before Trump met with Putin in Alaska Friday, he pressed for a ceasefire. He no longer does. Hours before today's White House meeting, Russia launched more aerial attacks on Ukrainian civilians, inflicting more injuries and death. Where this heads, no one quite knows. Trump vacillated publicly between confidence and resignation today. Confidence, a peace deal could be struck and held. Resignation, the war could very well drag on. What came from Russia, in addition to drones and missiles, was denunciation of any European troops inside Ukraine to guarantee its protection. Moscow called that idea provocative. Pretty rich considering who started all of this. We begin tonight with Olivia Rinaldi, who joins us from the White House. Olivia, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Things are still going on at the White House. The President Zelenskyy, and the European leaders still, as I gather it, talking.
Yeah, Major, we have yet to see any of those major European leaders leave the White House here today, including Ukrainian President Zelenskyy, They're still here, and they're still talking about those things you mentioned, that potential trilateral meeting between President Trump, President Zelenskyy, and President Putin. They're also talking about those security agreements. That was the key underlying point of today. That's what we heard from Secretary Rubio yesterday on Face the Nation, where he said that's what we're going to be discussing. What that actually look like? What does Article 5-like protections mean? Even President Trump today was asked whether that means troops on the ground in Ukraine. This coming from a president who said he would start no more foreign wars. Major, he didn't rule that out, that there could potentially be a military presence on the ground in Ukraine. I'm also thinking back to that mineral agreement that the U.S. and Ukraine signed earlier this year after diplomatic relations fell apart and then came back together, which strengthens economic ties between the U.S. and Ukraine, giving the U.S. a vested interest in the future and security of Ukraine. That was the first step. But now what does this look like to prevent any further Russian aggression if they are able to get to the table and have not a ceasefire, as you mentioned, but a full peace deal? What would that look like? Would there be a European security force on the ground? And just one last point on that ceasefire. We heard from German Chancellor Merz, who said he believes there needs to be a ceasefire on the ground in order for there to be any discussion about a peace proposal. He said that while sitting at the table with President Trump, who has now, since Friday, after meeting with President Putin, changed his stance, where he said he believes there needed to be a ceasefire. Now he doesn't believe that there needs to be a ceasefire in order to get a peace deal. The German chancellor there saying there needs to be one in order to stop the bloodshed and killing and actually get some full-throated agreement on the ground between President Putin and President Zelenskyy.
Olivia Rinaldi, please stand by, as I know you will, at the White House. If there's any other developments, we will go back to you as the day progresses. Thank you so very much.